Is Drake May still our top waiver wire ad at the quarterback position heading into week 13?
He is, but more as a stash. I mean, here's the reality of week 13 is every team's playing. So you've got quarterbacks, like whoever you've been using, whoever you've been counting on, they're available. So you should have your guy. At quarterback, you're kind of thinking to the future. That's my thought. And Drake May is on bye next week. So you're really talking about like spot starts during the playoffs. Drake May is one option. The other one that I kind of like here, Theo, is Will Levis, right? Especially if you've got your guy for this week, right? And you're just looking for someone that can fill in at some point throughout the playoffs. Maybe your guy gets hurt. Maybe you just want to have something available. There's basically two teams that have great schedules. The Giants, who we don't know what's going on with the quarterback situation there. Maybe in Superflex, you stash a Drew Lock or something. But Will Levis, he gets Washington this week, which all of a sudden isn't a great matchup, but that's his worst matchup rest of the way. He gets the Jaguars, right? And then he gets the Bengals, the Colts, and the Jaguars again. And Will Levis has actually been playing pretty well here. So I've definitely got some situations where I don't really trust my starter, whether it's Geno Smith or Caleb Williams. There's a world where I end up starting Will Levis matchup based, or even starting him rest of the way in some of these deeper leagues. So definitely got to look at him. For a spot start this week, Bryce Young has been playing a little bit better. They get Tampa Bay. They won 2 games in a row and then put up 27 on the Chiefs, 27-30. I mean, they're balling. In the really deep leagues, it's like Drew Lock, Trey Lance. And then I guess, in your super flex stuff, you're just stashing any backup that could, like maybe a Justin Fields or anybody that if the starter goes down, you've actually got something, because like even if like a Lamar Jackson goes down, are you going to start Josh Johnson? It's like you really got to ask yourself who can actually keep this ship afloat.
Yeah, no, for me, I love where you're at with these quarterbacks. I think that Bryce Young, yes, is playing a lot better. I love the Will Levis call. We talked about this in the pre-show. You have that week 14 where it actually matches up very well, where Levis has a really nice matchup against Jacksonville the same week that Jaden Daniels is out, the same week that Lamar Jackson is out, the same week that Bo Nix is out. And Drake May is also out that week. So that's a week 14. It matches up perfectly well. We love being 1 week ahead when it comes to bye weeks. So add Will Levis this week for cheaper than you'd have to spend in week 14 when there's teams fighting for their playoff lives. And the running back spot is actually super interesting. After last night with J.K. Dobbins getting banged up with the knee, Gus Edwards becomes a priority. And I see a lot of takes out there about Kamani Vidal, Hassan Haskins. Vidal, I expect to get mixed back inactive the last couple of weeks with Edwards being back. But for me, it's Gus Edwards. I think he's the one that's most likely to get 15 carries or more in a top offense, and he's going to get the goal line work, Coop. So some of the other guys might get mixed in, but I think Edwards will get the rushing touchdowns. Not super exciting, but enough to sort of get you by. I'd call him a low-end RB2 if Dobbins is out, based on volume. And for me, I still like adding Amir Abdullah. Last week, he had 5 receptions, caught a touchdown pass. Basically, he delivered on the thesis that he was going to see increased work as a receiver with the backfield to his own. And there's really no indication this week that Madison and Zamir White are going to be back. So if they're back, we can adjust it. But I still think Abdullah has earned himself a valuable receiving role out of the backfield.
That game's on Friday too. Just to mention that's a Black Friday game, which means that on Wednesday, if he doesn't practice, that's essentially your Thursday practice, right? So if he's not going on Wednesday, then it's probably Abdullah again.
Yeah, and like the Chiefs are also a difficult team to run on, which means a couple more dump offs. Where like Abdullah will temper our expectations. It's nice he found the end zone, but if a guy can get 5 catches like right in that wheelhouse as a running back, even if he gives us about 30 rushing yards, it's still going to be a somewhat usable score, like low expectations, like a flex play, like a low end RB2, high end RB3 type play. The guy that's interesting as well, Jeremy McNichols. Jeremy McNichols has 4 rushing touchdowns on the season. Brian Robinson banged up. Austin Eckler probably out with a concussion. And Washington heads into their bye week in week 14. So with McNichols, much like Abdullah, it's a 1 week bet, but still potential that Brian Robinson just can't really stay healthy for the rest of the year. So McNichols might have some value coming out of the bye week, but really it's for this week, a spot start. McNichols has looked good, and revenge game narrative, Coop, gets his former team, Tennessee. He's angry about seeing those guys. I don't know about that, but it's still cool, the revenge game narrative. And then after that, for me, it's a lot of the same guys. Like, I was very disappointed about the Trey Benson usage, but he's still an elite handcuff. Blake Corum, another handcuff to roster. Braylon Allen is out there. Tank Bigsby is going to be back this week. That's one where he's had multiple RB1 finishes this season, was dropped in a lot of leagues, but Bigsby's a guy where he's been the most successful runner in Jacksonville by a pretty wide margin this season. Anything to add on the running backs that I recommended, and anybody you would add into the mix, Coop?
Nope, I think that you have it exactly. Oh, actually, I would add one more name, because Amir Abdullah and McNichols are the spot starts, and Gus Edwards has more like chance of having multiple weeks of relevancy. I would also throw Tank Bigsby in that group if he was dropped, because some people were dropping him through the bye weeks. He might be available out there, and it really is tough. Make your plans now for week 14, because there's not a lot of overlap of good matchups and also available. I mean, we're talking like Jalen Warren maybe against the Browns, but he's rostered in a lot of leagues. After that, in terms of like even teams that are in the even at the halfway mark in terms of defense versus running backs, there's not much out there. Maybe Devin Singletary versus the Saints, but there's a lot of the scrappy guys have bad matchups, Theo, which is not good. Week 14 is going to be tough.
I hope Devin Singletary falls flat on his face this week and they go back to my guy, Tyrone Tracy.
Agreed.
I was completely tilted to see Motor Singletary get the rushing touchdown. Give those to my guy Tracy. Nobody's using Devin Singletary these days. Wide receiver wise, Coop, my favorite wide receiver ad, Devon Vele, older rookie. Bo Nix and Cortland Sutton are sort of the best correlation play that no one's talking about right now. Over the last 5 games, Nix and Sutton are both top 5 at their positions, but Denver desperately needs not only a secondary target, but a reliable secondary weapon on this offense. It's been sort of a revolving door at running back, nothing at tight end, but Vele is showing signs of life. He's a player that we discussed him in week 1, Coop. He was a player that had a very strong opening game, and now it's sort of like come full circle where he had a season-high 9 targets. Denver beats the Raiders, and he ends up with 6 catches for 80 yards, 20+% target share. He's getting good slot usage, and he's a 6'5" player who's able to kind of move around and play the slot. So to me, Devon Vele could be like a wide receiver 3 for the rest of the season, and a player that we can stick in our wide receiver 3 spot. We can stick in our flex spot. Denver has the week 14 bye, but this is really kind of a rest of the season outlook. And then for me, after that, we've got to talk about Adam Thielen. He came back, wasn't traded at the trade deadline, which I thought that they would trade him, but he ends up getting 3 catches for 57 yards his first game back against a difficult defense in Kansas City. I think Thielen's going to ramp up, has a good matchup this week against Tampa Bay. And if you don't like Thielen, Xavier Legette's still available in a bunch of leagues. He had 4 catches for 56 yards. I'm going to leave David Moore on the waiver wire. I know he had a very strong game, but for me, I'd rather invest in Thielen or Legette with a lean towards Thielen. Dontavian Wicks as a spot start. Here we go again, Coop. Dontavian Wicks, the player that we were excited about earlier in the year, dropped a bunch of passes. Disappointing when there was like Dontavian Wicks waiver wire mania. But now you have a game against Miami. You have Romeo Doubs concussed. And Wicks might actually have some pretty strong matchups in this one in a game that could tilt over. After that, Noah Brown needs to be mentioned. He's sort of our favorite floor play wide receiver. Nick Westbrook-Akine has 6 touchdowns in his last 7 games. Touchdown or bust player, Coop. But when you score a touchdown every single game, that sort of matters. And like you said with Levis, you get that really nice schedule. And we got to mention MVS. MVS had 196 receiving yards and 3 touchdown grabs over his previous 2 games. What if, Coop, what if during their bye week they say, you know what? Let's get MVS like 7 targets this week and YOLO balls down the field and a ton of Taysom Hill and a ton of MVS in this like bizarro offense. It could happen.
Right. Unlike a guy like Mike Williams, the snaps for MVS have gone up every single week. He's gone from like 35 to 45, now 65%. So could keep moving up. Not to mention, like if you also got to factor in where your team is at. Like if you're not going to use a lot of these guys this week, like Devon Vele is a guy that we mentioned, and guys like Demario Douglas, Noah Brown, all 3 of those guys go on bye next week. So if you're not using them this week, you're not going to use them next week, and then you're basically would have to plug them right into your lineup for playoffs. That's a little dicey. That's why for me, I look at Nick Westbrook-Akine. Week 14, he's got a matchup with the Jags. MVS has a matchup with the Giants in week 14 when you actually might use them. So before you decide who to put the money on and where to go, ask yourself, are you going to use them this week or do you need them for next week, or what's your end goal? Like if it's just a long-term stash, pick whoever you want. But if you do have problems for bye weeks, week 14, maybe you do lean into Nick Westbrook, Keenan, or MVS. So figured I'd mention that. For tight end, we might get another Schoonmaker week. I mean, check first to see if any of these names are available. Hunter Henry, Jonnu Smith, Zach Ertz, Will Disley. Keep in mind that Hunter Henry and Zach Ertz both are on bye for week 14, so you can't use them there. But always check and see if those guys are there. They're floating around 50%, but they've been rostered in a lot of leagues because they've been playing so well. For deeper guys, you need to look at guys like Schoonmaker. If Ferg isn't going to clear concussion protocol, and they do play on Thursday, he's in a good spot, and he's definitely a guy that we're going to throw in there. He did rotate a little bit with Brevin span forward, but he got the better usage, so he's the better option. Noah Gray is another guy that you got to look at as a guy that plays 60% of the snaps. He's got 2 touchdowns in back-to-back games. Don't expect that, but he could easily get 4 targets, score a touchdown again. And then, kind of deep, Tommy Tremble. I mean, if Jatavian Sanders is going to miss this week, he went to the hospital with a neck injury. Ian Thomas is on IR. He's not coming back. Like, Tremble could have a full-time role in an offense. It's kind of gross, but he's got Tampa Bay, which is actually a really good matchup. So more of a DFS play. I'll have him in the article, but Tommy Tremble is a guy like that. And then for week 14, Ferguson if he's back against Cincinnati, or Schoonmaker if he's not, and maybe Chigakonkwo going up against the Jaguars in week 14. I know he's not getting a ton of targets, but it's just a really good matchup for tight ends. For deeper stashes, I'm still holding on to JT Sanders. Maybe I'll take a look at Greg Dulcich if he signs somewhere, but that's about it, man. That's as deep as we're going.
Yeah, it's some sketchy names at the tight end position, but again, we don't know where those big-time tight end scoring weeks are going to come from. Last week, right. Noah Gray, 2 touchdown catches. The week before, Noah Gray, 2 touchdown catches. Taysom Hill pretty much broke fantasy before his bye week. And we're going to be back next week, and we're going to get you prepared for the fantasy football playoffs. Have a happy Thanksgiving. We'll see you soon.